Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Good Grief workshop. For those that aren't familiar with Good Grief, we are an all-in-one platform that supports people navigating caregiving, end-of-life planning, and loss. We provide helpful guides, checklists, workshops such as these, access to vetted experts, and a supportive community of other people who have been in your shoes and know how to help. I'm Veronica Polito, the founder of Good Grief, and I'm really grateful that you're here for our session on what it means to be an executor. Today's session is led by Tara Yukawa. She's a certified executor advisor, and she's the founder of Sage Vault. Tara specializes in helping families navigate what it really means to serve as an executor, and she works with people to help create clear, personalized roadmaps for the process. She helps them understand what needs to be done, what to prioritize, and how to stay organized along the way. Her work includes executor playbooks, toolkits, templates, and guided family sessions where she actually audits existing plans to help identify gaps or areas that might need attention for you and your family. She also recently came up with a great guided workbook that helps you talk to your parents about the future and have some of those complicated conversations. Highly recommend checking it out. Now, before I hand it to Tara, just a quick note on the format for today. So, what we will do is that this session will be about 30 minutes long. So, we'll end around the 5:40 minute mark, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A session. If you do have any questions throughout, please feel free to put them in the group chat so that you don't forget them, and we'll be sure to address them at the end. And, part of the reason that we're doing that is that we are recording this session in case any of our members weren't able to make it. And what we'll do is at the end, we'll pause or we'll stop the recording so that then you can feel free to ask questions and have it be a little bit more of a private setting. So with that, I will hand it off to Tara, and thank you so much for joining and walking us through all of this.
Yeah, thank you so much for the warm introduction, Veronica. Let me share my screen quickly. Okay, fantastic. Thank you again so much for the introduction and for all of you joining us today. We are going to cover what it means to be an executor, and here's sort of the format that we're going to go through. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and how I got into this work. We're also going to cover the executor role. What is it exactly, and what is the executor responsible for? And then also walking through what is a comprehensive legacy plan? How do you set up a comprehensive legacy plan so that you can help provide some relief and clear instructions for your executor if you're planning for yourself? And then also some key mistakes to avoid in the executor role. And then things that you can do today that will really help create clarity as you plan for yourself or you help your parents plan. Um, as we go through this, there will be a few areas where there are QR codes and things like that that you can scan. So keep a lookout for that. I have tons of free downloads on my website, which is mysagevault.com. But there will be specific QR codes throughout to direct you to specific blog posts or free downloads and things like that. As Veronica mentioned, we're going to go through this entire presentation. And then if you have any questions, we'll address all of those at the end. So moving along, let's talk about the reality check of what really happens when someone passes. And I'm going to start with my story. So these are my in-laws. This is Sheila and Kenneth. And Sheila had dementia for a number of years. And so we knew that her time was coming, and we had just moved her into um, a memory care facility when she took a fall, and she ended up going into the hospital and having to have pretty significant abdominal surgery. And it was one of those things where, quite frankly, she just didn't recover from it. And my father-in-law, when we got the call in the middle of the night that she had passed, he let us know that he was heading up to the hospital. And we found out the next day what had actually happened is he had had a pulmonary embolism while driving to the hospital, and he crashed his car. And so they both passed away in the same day. As a matter of fact, about 4 hours from each other. And obviously, my husband and I were in complete shock. We lost, both of them at the same time. And on paper, they had done everything right. They had a will, they had a trust, they had redeeded their house. Like they had done on paper everything that we thought was enough. But unfortunately, the legal paperwork alone is not enough. And that's a lot of what we're going to cover today. Things like we were never able to get into their email inbox. So we were never able to track down all of their paperless billing. So we had to wait by the mailbox. We um we never knew in order to like figure out what were their debts, what bills were they paying on a regular basis. Again, it was a lot of the scavenger hunt and waiting by the mailbox and trying to piece things together. And it was the administrative load as well as taking on this role that no one seems to talk enough about of like, what is the job description? How do we do this? How do we do this right? How do we make sure that we are protecting ourselves as executors, thinking through, making sure that, there's no fraud or that we're following all the steps that we're supposed to follow. And that is how I got into this work. I knew that there had to be a better way and that people needed guidance through a really challenging time where there's a huge workload, but also that you're grieving. And so making sure that you have really clear plans in place. So today we're going to talk about like two key things, right? Which is one, if you think that you might be the executor or you're currently in the executor role, we're going to talk through that process. But another piece of today is if you're thinking about your own plan or you're helping your parents work through their plan, some of the key things that you can do today to help make, relieve that load when the time does come. So, did the slides switch for you guys? It just says 570 hours. Okay, great. So 570 hours is the average hours that are spent by the executor. And I'm here to tell you that that number is like right on the money. It is a huge undertaking. The average cost to settle an estate is $14,000, and 63% of executors feel unprepared for the role. But I'm here to tell you, if the planning gets done on the front side, and we don't just plan for the legal, that we also plan for the administrative, this burden can be really can you can lift this burden from your executor and from your loved ones. So let's talk about what the executor's job is really. This is a confusing word for a lot of people, and um, the the role is it's so much more than legal. And we've been talking about this along the way that, the legal part is just the tip of the iceberg. It's the logistics and the emotions that become the most challenging. This is a list of a lot of the different tasks that the executor is responsible for. And you can think of the executor as the manager of the estate. They're making sure that all of the bills continue to get paid, all of the bookkeeping, that the investments are being managed, that the taxes are paid, if there's real estate, that the houses get sold, that everything stays insured, that physical assets get distributed appropriately, all of the administrative tasks, planning the funeral. This is a full-time job. And, all of us we have our own lives. We've got full-time jobs. We may have children or fur babies. We have a lot that we are managing in our own lives. And then stepping into this executor role truly is a full-time responsibility. And putting that on top of the family dynamics and grief that come along with when you lose a loved one. And that's an incredible opportunity of the service that Good Grief is providing, is really helping executors and families be able to manage grief in an effective way. And so you heard me talk about the executor as a manager. The executor is a fiduciary responsibility that has legal duties to settle an estate. And these are really the three key areas that an executor is responsible for. One is to protect the estate. Sometimes you feel like, especially early on, if you're having to go through probate and things like that, you feel like things get really delayed. And during that time period, making sure that the assets stay protected. As an example of this is If there's a home, you need to make sure that the electricity and the water stays on and that there's no pests or things like that. So making sure that those assets are protected. And I know that we've got some financial advisors on the call as well, making sure that if there's any investments, that those investments don't take a loss, that they stay where they are, if not grow during this period of time in which the executor is responsible for managing. Making sure that all of the debts and taxes get paid, and then that the assets are distributed according to the will or the trust. And so let's talk through what is a comprehensive state plan. And we're going to switch over now to some of the legal paperwork that everybody should have. So two documents here. This is the medical power of attorney and the durable power of attorney. An important thing here is that these two documents are effective while you're living. So once somebody passes, these documents are no longer relevant or no longer valid. But the medical power of attorney grants somebody the authority to be able to make healthcare decisions for you. So if for any reason you are incapacitated, you've said, this person is able to make medical decisions for me. On the flip side, the durable power of attorney, and this could potentially be the same person, but maybe it's not. A durable power of attorney is somebody that you authorize to be able to make financial and legal decisions for you on your behalf. This could be as simple as paying bills, or as complex as selling property or making significant financial changes. The durable power of attorney has a lot of flexibility on what you allow somebody to be able to do or not do on your behalf. Then moving on to the will and the trust. So a will does a few key things. A will names the executor, so the person that you would have manage your estate after you've passed, um, the guardian of minor children, if you have minor children, and then defines asset distribution. An important thing to note about a will is that a will does require probate. So if you only have a will, your family will have to go to court and they will have to hire an attorney in order to go through the probate process. Because of that, that means that anything that comes out of the will and the probate court process does become public record. So because of that, a lot of people choose to do trusts. And trusts, there's a variety of different types of trusts, and I'm not going to go into those details today, but a trustee is named to manage the trust. So just like an executor manages the estate, a trustee would manage the trust. And within that trust are beneficiaries, and those are the recipients of whatever is held in the trust. And that trust provides distribution instructions. The thing that a trust does is it avoids probate, it stays private, and it gives you a lot more flexibility with how assets are distributed versus, say, an account where you've just listed a single beneficiary. If you list a trust, if you wanted it to be able to be reinvested or distributed across multiple people, a trust will allow you to do that. This QR code here will take you to a document. It's a free download that gives you more detailed information about these different types of documents, why you would want them, what they are. And so you can find those there. You can also go to the resources section of mysagevault.com, and there's a section within that that's called free downloads, and it's in there as well. So let's talk about one of the gotchas that I often see when I'm supporting executors, which is people forget to plan for the first 30 to 90 days after someone has passed. Because here's what happens is you have a funeral to pay for. You potentially have a mortgage or rent or utilities. Potentially you have court filing fees. And all of the assets become locked when someone has passed away. So their bank accounts, their insurance payouts, investment accounts, retirement funds, et cetera. You can see the list here. And in order for those to become unlocked, you typically need a few things. One is you need the death certificate. And a death certificate can take anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks before you have that document in hand. And that right there is the biggest problem, is a lot of times people need to be able to access those assets in order to pay for the funeral, but they can't gain access to those assets without that piece of paper. So then they have loved ones that are being held at the funeral home. Um, Particularly if you want to have, a typical burial that, they're in, for lack of a better word, they're in cold storage for a number of weeks. And of course, that is not ideal. So making sure that as you are planning um, for yourself or with your parents and family members, planning for to be able to have some assets that can be liquidated quickly without a death certificate is unbelievably helpful. Not knowing what the executor or what the family member's financial situation is. A lot of times what happens is families end up like pooling money together in order to cover these initial expenses. And then there's a distribution process that happens later. But if this can be planned for up front, it can be unbelievably helpful and relieve a lot of burden for families. So let's talk about some of the mistakes that executors often make that are, you know, let's try to avoid these mistakes. So one is distributing assets too soon. Assets should not be distributed until taxes and debts are paid first. So once those things are done, then there should be a formal process of how those assets are distributed. And a lot of times, what I see unfortunately happen is people distribute the assets too soon, and then they uncover back taxes or debts that they weren't aware of and things like that. So making sure that all of that happens first before any assets are distributed can really save a lot of headache. Also avoiding mixing estate funds and personal funds, just generally good bookkeeping. Missing tax filings and debt payments, that again, that ties back into the first one as well. And then family communication can be really, really challenging. And what I always recommend executors do is develop whatever the list of individuals, families, or friends, et cetera, that need to be part of the regular communication to understand, what the next steps are and what's happening, and have a regular email cadence that they can expect each and every month that says, these are the key milestones, this is what's been done so far, and to help give them an idea of when distribution will happen and where they potentially need help and where there's blockers and things like that. And that will help quiet the noise for executors of the phone constantly ringing or, Aunt Sue calling or the text messages that you're getting, et cetera. If you can be proactive with that communication, then it relieves a lot of the reactive burden and therefore a lot of the anxiety and stress that can come with all of the questioning. So, some things that you want to think about is if you are an executor or an executor had to step in to a situation today, would they be able to answer these questions? Would they be able to find where all of your key documents are without completely tearing the house apart? Would they be able to access any sort of banking or accounts that they would need to be able to pay for your funeral, or even digital accounts? Like I mentioned earlier, we were never able to get into my in-laws' email accounts ever. Um, Knowing which bills need to be paid first and which ones can wait. What are the ones that can be turned off versus not? um, Knowing who to call first. If you have a trusted attorney or a CPA or any like key people that you would want your executor to be able to call first, that would, a financial advisor is another great example of that. You want to make sure that your executor knows your financial advisor's name and phone number. Um, and then also making sure that they can handle your digital life. So thinking through subscriptions and cloud storage and social media. And we're going to cover some homework on that in just a moment. But if the executor can't answer these questions today, then you know that you've got a little bit more planning to do. Um, so an executor really needs this clarity So having a will and a trust is a great first step, but there's additional things that you can do to really help relieve the burden for your executor and for your family. And consolidating portfolios with a trusted advisor, from a financial advisor perspective, is definitely something to do, particularly as you start to approach retirement age and beyond. Creating a legacy inventory. And so these are a lot of the things that I mentioned of like, what are all of the debts? What are all of the accounts? Making sure that all those things are documented. There's a QR code here as well. This is sort of a framework and a template, if you will, to be able to start creating that legacy inventory. And then making sure that you are thinking through your plans as if you were the executor. And here's the key piece, is making sure that you talk to your executor. Make sure that they know that they've been listed as the executor and give them an opportunity to um, walk through the plan with you and let them to be able to ask questions. And that way, as the planner, you feel a lot more confident in that your executor's ability to be able to manage the estate, but the executor also has a much clearer picture of what they're walking into. So here is something that you could literally do on your lunch break tomorrow. This is your 30-minute homework, and everybody should do this. This is making sure that your social media accounts are set to memorialize. And what that means is that when you pass, your executor can inform Meta, for example, and say, this person has passed, here's their death certificate. And then that account becomes memorialized. And as the executor, that or whoever you name, so if your executor is super financially savvy but not so tech savvy, assign somebody else. It doesn't have to be the same person. But whoever you set as the manager of that memorialization will be able to manage that account. And this helps prevent fraud. So that's a key reason why you want to you want to set this up for all of your social media accounts. Same story for whether you're a Google, Apple, Android user, or all of the above. Um, if you go to this QR code, there are links to all of the right places and the specific instructions on how to set this up. But this allows you to be able to say who should have access to your Gmail account, to your Google Drive, to your Apple iCloud storage, to your physical Apple devices, as an example. So making sure that all of this is set up. If you do nothing else, like this is a key thing that you want to do to make sure that you're not sending your executor and family members off on a scavenger hunt. This is a great first step because in this day and age when so much is paperless, not having access to the technology and the email accounts is a huge pain point. So in addition, making sure that you build a good support system. You saw that colorful wheel at the beginning where we talked through all of the tasks that an executor has to do. So many executors feel like, oh my God, I have to be everything. I have to be an attorney. I have to be a tax professional. I have to be an expert in real estate and investment. And truly, you do not. Really, your job as the executor is to make sure that you're hiring the right professionals. Your job is to protect the estate. And to protect the estate, having the right professionals in your corner truly is in the best interest of the estate and all of its heirs. So, building this support system, and if you are building this for your own plan, making sure that you document who these people are in your life so that your executor can call on them first. But making sure that you have these professionals in your corner and you can see sort of everybody on this wheel as far as the different professions that you would want to bring in. And then also I've got good grief on here as well, because as an executor, taking care of yourself and taking care of your mental health and managing the grief well is just as important as any of these other things. So whether it's good grief or another solution or therapy or whatever the things may be, making sure that you are taking care of yourself as you go through this process. A comprehensive estate plan is the greatest act of love. There is nothing more painful than, watching an executor who is grieving and then just feel like they are on this never-ending scavenger hunt. Doing this plan gives them, it doesn't relieve the grief, but it does relieve so much of the anxiety and so much of the added pressure of not knowing what to do or constantly asking yourself, is this what they would have wanted? All of those things can add so much pressure. And so doing this planning and helping your loved ones to do this planning is unbelievably helpful. So this is the end. These are two additional links that I wanted to share with you. As Veronica mentioned at the beginning, I have a workbook. It's called Before It's Too Late. This is a workbook to help adult children have these conversations with their parents or with their loved ones. A lot of times, when I'll speak for myself, when I've gone to talk to my own parents about this process, the first reaction is like, whoa, 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 slow your roll. I'm playing pickleball every weekend. Why are you planning my funeral? And that's not what it's about at all, right? It's about just making sure that you know what they would want so that you feel prepared when it's time that they need some extra help. And so this helps reframe some of those conversations. So for them, it feels less like an attack and more around curiosity and focusing on their values and how to frame your questions and the planning process in a different way that is more effective. So that's what this workbook is, and you can grab it on Amazon. In addition, I have a weekly newsletter. I'd love for you to subscribe, and you can use that QR code and register there. And with that, that is everything. Thank you guys so much for your time.